Hello and welcome to Study with Sudhir. Today in this video, we'll be studying Beethoven, which is part of your ISC Class 12 English Literature Rhapsody textbook. But शुरुआत करने से पहले I want to say a couple of things in Hindi. I actually tried translating much of what I had prepared into Hindi for both Tithonus and Beethoven, which is why it has taken so many days. But trust me, it just does not work. Because अगर आपके syllabus में if there are two complicated poems, those are Tithonus and Beethoven, and even Small Towns and Rivers to an extent. These are extremely complex poems. और अगर उसको मैं हिंदी में समझाऊंगा तो आपको उससे फायदा इसलिए नहीं होगा क्योंकि आप उन शब्दों का इस्तेमाल अपने आंसर्स में बिल्कुल नहीं कर सकते. Instead, if you are able to understand it in simple English and the kind of things that I will tell you, you will be able to use it in your answers, and that will help you score high marks, because at the end of the day, that's precisely what we want to do, isn't it? So that is the intention. I will try to explain a few things in Hindi once in a while, but trust me, trust my judgment. If you trust me, I will tell you that it will help you much more if you understand this in simple English with a bit of Hindi wherever I can. Otherwise, जिस तरह की का theme है इस particular poem में, if I try to translate into Hindi, it just becomes too much of a very complicated Hindi. और अगर उसको बोलचाल की भाषा में समझाने की कोशिश करूं, तब you lose the essence of the themes of the poem, which are extremely complicated and complex. So let's get started. Shane Koyczan is the name of the poet. He's a Canadian poet. This is how you pronounce the name of the poet. This is from his own tweet. I do a lot of research. मैं इधर-उधर से नहीं देखता. मैं उनके खुद के Twitter handle पे जाके देखा. He said, "This is how you need to pronounce my name. Shane as in rain, Koy as in koi, Zan, which rhymes with pan. So Shane, Koy, pan, Zan. Okay. C is silent." Now he's a Canadian poet and writer, born in 1976. Now he's known as a spoken word poet. Okay. Which means his poems are meant to be performed aloud. They focus on rhythm and theatricality, in the sense of, usko performance ke roop mein dekha jata hai. And he does his poems on social issues like bullying, on cancer, on death, on eating disorders. In fact, unki ek particular poem hai, which is an anti-bullying poem. I looked up YouTube for it. To this day, that's the name of the poem. It has 26 million views aaj ki date mein, right? So that's how famous he is. About this poem, now this particular two paragraphs are very important, और इसमें से कई lines का इस्तेमाल आप अपने answers में भी कर सकते हैं. Now he writes about the struggles of this poet called Beethoven. Okay. Now this particular line, the poem explores Beethoven's struggles with deafness and his transformation of his pain into powerful music. So, जो उनकी कमी थी, which is that he can't hear. Despite that, just imagine. I want you to imagine, because unless you get into it, stop thinking of it as a poem which is there in your syllabus, जिसको जबरदस्ती पढ़ना है. Instead, I want you to close your eyes and just imagine you are a very powerful speaker on stage. You are a great communicator. However, you do not have the ability to hear. So you can feel the words in your tongue, on your tongue and in your mind, but you cannot hear what you are speaking. You cannot even hear the applause of the audience when they are clapping for you. Beethoven की हालत भी ऐसे ही थी. He couldn't hear the music that he composed. He couldn't hear the claps of the audience. He could only see them. He could only see their reaction. So he struggled with this impediment called deafness, and he transformed his pain into very powerful music. So what Beethoven, so usse kya hota hai, you immediately are able to connect it, that he becomes a symbol of determination. Ki kuch bhi ho jaye, main ye karke dikhaunga. And his pursuit of excellence, that in whatever I do, I will be the best. Of course, isme ek aur factor tha about which I will tell you about, because he had an abusive childhood, because his father wanted him to be a genius. So he kept on driving him, not good enough, keep on trying. So he always used to try to convert his weakness of deafness into a strength. So what Koyczan does through his energetic way of writing, there is a lot of energy in the way he writes, and in the second half of the poem, you will feel it. And while I'm explaining it, I'll ensure you feel it. Okay. Because there's so many imageries, so many metaphors that he uses, and that kind of enhances, further increases, makes better the right experience of the listener, which is you. And you almost feel as though you're listening to the music of Beethoven and his creativity in creating that music. Apart from that, we know about his determination and his dedication to music. Okay. Quickly, let's go through the themes of the poem. Uske baad, we will go through the line by line explanation of the poem. The first theme, of course, is the power of music, which is a central theme. He portrays music as a force. Ye maine Instagram pe main dal dunga. The music is able to transform emotions, transcend ka matlab hai. Now you may think, are kya mushkil word hai? But unless you learn new words, you are in class 12, mere bacha. You are in class 12. You need to use good language in order to impress the examiner. ये नहीं कि जो class 3 में या class 5 में English लिख रहे थे वो English लिखोगे तो फायदा नहीं होगा. So it transcends limitations. यानी कि it overcomes all kind of limitations and hurdles and obstacles, and it creates a deep connection between the artist, that is Beethoven, and the listener. Then the second theme is that of obsession. कि हट जिसको बोलते हैं ना हिंदी में कि मैं करके दिखाऊंगा. The dedication to his craft, his relationship with music, which is all consumed. He's obsessed with that music. He's devoted to the craft of music, just like about A.R. Rahman's story. A.R. Rahman lost his father at a very young age. His mother said, you will learn music and you will make use of all these instruments. I'm not going to give them on rent to make a living. And that pushed Rahman to learn music, right? So he was completely devoted to his craft. So he's willing to he would travel quite a long distance to get books which are published in the UK, in which he would learn more about music. I'm talking about A.R. Rahman, not Beethoven. So Beethoven is willing similarly to go to extraordinary lengths to create music and to experience that music. Then, of course, there is the thing of childhood trauma. His father was an abusive father who was constantly pushing him, right? And this is a phrase which when we get into it, I'll explain. The broken record, which is a metaphor, it represents the lingering, the influence, the deep influence of his father's disapproval. No, not good enough. He will keep saying that, not good enough. So Beethoven was obsessed with having to prove to his father that he was good enough. So he's all the time striving for perfection. Just like, when I write my columns, I try to be perfect. कोई भी एक comma, एक full stop में भी गलती नहीं होनी चाहिए. It has to be the best. I don't believe in perfection. I believe in being the best on that particular day. 1 week later, I may be able to write a better piece. But on this particular day, this should be my best effort. Similarly, when you are studying, you should always make it a point. Aaj ka din will be the best possible day. That has to be your endeavor, right? Don't try to be perfect in life. Try to be the best in life. Deafness and this relationship with this is a very important thing. The fact that he's deaf, this relationship with silence. Just imagine, you speak, you can feel your tongue mouthing the words, but you can't hear yourself. And how your experience with either public speaking or music will be. Beethoven ki halat wahi thi. So he has a unique intimacy. He has a relationship with silence and how he creates music within that silence. How beautiful. Please use these words. मैं आपके लिए ही लिख के लाया हूं. Please use these phrases in your answers so that your answers look the best, so that you can say SWS में देखा, वहां से सीखा, यहाँ पे लिखा, marks आए हमारे. Genius and madness. The poem explores the thin line between genius and madness. It has taken me 2 days to prepare for this poem, mind you. Beethoven's intense behavior and dedication are questioned by the musicians. There are other musicians in the orchestra who don't understand him, right? Who struggle. But finally, so initially they question him. Hamesha hota hai, when you create something hatke, people will think, Arey, कुछ समझ में नहीं आया. I give you the example of Rahman again. Rahman का music always say it needs to grow on you. When you hear it for the first time, you'll say, क्या music है? ये sound बहुत अलग है. But let it grow on you, you will realize what the nuances that he creates. I'm a big Rahman fan, which is why I'm keeping on giving you the examples of Rahman, right? So we'll go to the poetic devices after I finish with the explanation of the poem. Okay, तो यहाँ तक समझ में आ गया. तो let's now move to the explanation of the poem, word by word, line by line. Please keep a notebook and pen with you so that you keep noting it down as we go along. Okay. Okay, so now let's get to the line by line explanation. The first word that is used here in this particular poem is listen. Now, listen is almost a very powerful word. It's almost as if the poet is instructing the audience, the listeners, people like you and me, ki suno, listen. Okay, we always say, no, you should always listen instead of just hearing. Listen is a much more of a 360-degree word than hear. So the poem begins by telling the reader to listen attentively. It also conveys to understand, that to understand Beethoven's music, usme jo emotions hain, and the kind of message that Beethoven is trying to convey through his music, you need to listen carefully. Okay, I'm deliberately going very slow so that you can take down notes, understand this very carefully. And this is for especially जिनको की हिंदी में समझने की आदत ज्यादा है. तो सुनने की आवश्यकता है, ध्यान से सुनने की आवश्यकता है. In this manner, so the moment you say, give an instruction like, or you say stand, it's an instruction. Listen, it's an instruction. So the poet is also grabbing your attention. He's drawing your attention that you need to listen carefully. And since the poem, now listen to this point carefully. Since the poem explores the deafness aspect of Beethoven, listen becomes a bit of an ironic word. You're talking about somebody who is deaf, but you're beginning the poem with the word listen. So it's ironic because it is referring to the very sense that Beethoven was losing or did not have. So this irony, it highlights the importance of music as a universal language, even for those who can't hear it. Like Beethoven is not able to hear the music, but for him, music is his language. Uski bhasha hai. Because us bhasha ki help madad se, he's communicating with the world. The music is his language with which he communicates to the world when he plays the piano. So listen becomes a kind of a call to engage. A poet is telling you to engage with Beethoven's work and to participate in it, be active listeners. Understood? So just see, even that one word, how deeply I have explained. Class 12 में आपको summary नहीं चाहिए. You need deep explanation so that you can attempt any question that comes from even this one particular word. His father made a habit out of hitting him. Basically, it tells you that the father was in the habit of beating him, abusing him. Physical violence. See, some men drink, some men yell, some men hit their children. So he's saying this line highlights the different ways in which men abuse their children under the influence of alcohol. And it can be both verbal abuse, it can be physical abuse also. This man did it all. The father both shouted as well as hit Beethoven, because I guess all men want their boys to be geniuses. So he says this basically it's trying to say that, not to defend the father, but he's almost trying to justify the violence, that it was all done because the father wanted, just like all men, he wanted his son to be a genius. That means to push the boundaries and become a genius. So he's not trying to justify, but he's almost kind of, giving you a reason why he was abusing him verbally and physically assaulting him. Beethoven. Now he introduces the name of the boy. Little boy living in his house where a name meant nothing. So even though Beethoven was a young composer, we know Beethoven as a name which is identified synonymous with musical genius, but immediately नाम देता है, but immediately he uses the word little boy, you know, as though reminding him that the famous composer was once a child. So the intention is to highlight the harsh reality of Beethoven's life, early life, okay? Because he lived in a house where a name meant nothing. You know, his identity was not valued. His identity was not valued, especially by the father. It is, the house is described as a place where Beethoven का नाम की कोई अहमियत नहीं थी. The name did not have any kind of value. So basically, this is suggesting a lack of love, a lack of respect, a lack of recognition for what he was, Beethoven was as an individual. So his potential for composing music was neither encouraged nor realized. Okay, you know, the home environment basically was not conducive. It was a bit harsh. Living in a house where mercy had to be earned through each perfect note tumbling up through the roof to tickle the toes of angels whose harps couldn't hold half the passion that was held in the hands of a young boy who was hard of hearing. Now you see how the poem has been written. That's why it's called a spoken poem. Okay, it does not really have a rhythm and a meter. So basically, this line shows the composer's very difficult childhood and his relationship with music, because now you know that he's basically a music composer. It suggests a very harsh and a very unforgiving kind of an environment at home. It also means that love, you know, कि जो कि किसी भी बच्चे का एक जन्मसिद्ध अधिकार होना चाहिए, you know, that, you know, it should be given to any child. Love and affection should be given to any child. It is the birthright of any child. It was not given in his own house, and he had to constantly make an effort to get that love and affection. Each perfect note. So mercy had to be earned. You know, mercy is almost like, you know, kisi tarah ki daya. Each perfect note represents Beethoven's attempt to earn that love and acceptance. That is, he poured his heart and soul into his music, hoping that it will please someone. उससे उसको कोई ना कोई पसंद करेगा, उस उम्मीद में he would kind of compose a lot of music. Then tumbling through up the roof to tickle the toes of angels. Now this is an imagery. It portrays Beethoven, the young Beethoven's yearning for some kind of validation. Validation matlab some kind of acceptance. Ki koi kahe, that is good. So he wanting all the time some kind of acceptance, some kind of recognition. So he imagines his music, you know, the tickle the toes of angels ka kyun use kiya gaya hai? Imagery isliye use kiya gaya hai that he imagines his music reaching the heavens, touching the hearts of the angels, because the angels are, you know, they are considered beings of pure goodness, you know, who will be very accepting. Okay, so that's what he imagines. So he's almost imagining something very heavenly with his music. A young boy who was hard of hearing. Now we come to know of his struggle with hearing, because deafness becomes a defining aspect of his life, Beethoven's life, that he has to cope with the fact that he cannot hear. It also emphasizes the passion. Usse pehle likha hai, could not hold half the passion that was held. So it also suggests that despite his hearing loss, his musical talent and desire for expression of that musical talent was very much there, was immense. Whose harps could not hold half the passion? What does it mean? It's again a very powerful use of imagery, because harp jo hota hai, it's a big instrument. Okay, it is something like this with lot of tars like this. You know, it's a very big instrument which is held with a lot of difficulty by the music composer. So harp is a large musical instrument that consists of a row of strings that like this, the row of strings like this, and they stretch from top to bottom. So what this line is suggesting is that even the celestial music, celestial matlab heavenly music, even the heavenly music which was played by the angels pales in comparison with the raw emotion and intensity that Beethoven pours into his music, right? कि उनका म्यूजिक में भी वो काबिलियत या वो क्वालिटी नहीं थी बीथोवन के संगीत के मुकाबले. So overall, this particular 3 lines, what they convey, they can tell us a lot about young Beethoven, that how desperately he's seeking love and recognition. You know, validation is an important word जिसका कि आप इस्तेमाल अपने answers में जरूर कीजिए. Validation is a word which means wants to be accepted, wants to be recognized through his music, and even with the barrier of deafness, his passion, the passion that he has for music, it shines through, and it shows that he has the potential for greatness, to be a great composer despite the deafness ka weakness and despite all the hardships that he endures. Beethoven, who heard his father's anthem every time he put finger to ivory, it was not good enough. Now, ivory is a reference to the piano, because the keys of the piano, जो keys होते हैं इस तरह से एक key होता है, they're all white and black. So basically they are in color of white ivory. So that's a reference to the piano. So the line reveals the conflict in Beethoven's life. The father's anthem. Now this is an important phrase again, which is a key phrase which you should use in your answers. The father's anthem, it does not mean kisi tarah ki tarif. It is not conveying praise of any kind. It is in fact referring to the constant criticism. It is referring to the constant disapproval, okay, by the father that Beethoven received, that it became almost like an anthem. You know, bolte na ki, oh, this is Mumbai Indians ka anthem. This is Kolkata Knight Riders ka anthem, which is like a theme song kind of thing. So this was like a constant thing from his father. Okay, so his father relentlessly kept pushing him towards musical achievement, and every time that Beethoven played, it was like he could hear his father's voice judging his performance by saying, not good enough. This is another key phrase that you should use in your answers. So kuch bhi ho, he would say, not good enough. Slowly, if he will play, he will be told, not good enough. He will play strongly, softly, not good enough. He'll play strongly, not good enough. And when he could play no more and his fingers cramped like the gnarled roots of tree trunks, it was not good enough. He's almost shouting, kisi bhi tarah se, he will not be happy. So it was affecting Beethoven at a psychological level. When he's writing it in capital letters, it is also to convey that it is affecting Beethoven at a very psychological level. Why wouldn't be? Kisi ko bhi hoga na, if you're all the time criticized as not being good enough. Yes, on one hand, it kind of inspired and motivated him to play better, perfectly, but it also created a sense कि मैं किसी भी तरह से अपने father की expectations को fulfill नहीं कर पाऊंगा, that I will not be able to fulfill the expectations of my father. He heard his father's anthem every time. ये जो line है ना, this also means the fact that it had become internalized. That even when he played, even when his father was not there, or even when his father was not criticizing him, he felt as though he could hear his father's voice, not good enough. You know, it had become so internalized in him that he would almost like hear it in his mind. So even without his father being physically present, Beethoven could hear the criticism ringing in his ears whenever he played. So the father's anthem is a burden, boj hai. It is also a motivator of some kind, because it pushed Beethoven to excel. But at the same time, it also created a sense of inadequacy. यानी कि एक कमी की एहसास होता था, that he would feel inadequate at some time, and there was a constant yearning, a constant struggle for approval by his father, and that took an emotional toll on young Beethoven. You can imagine, I'm sure, if when you are young, you are constantly being criticized. And you are not good enough. Sharma ji ke bete ko dekho, kitna badhiya hai, kitne अच्छे marks लाता है, तुम बेकार हो, तुम फिजूल के time waste करते हो, you are not good enough, तुम्हारा कुछ नहीं होगा जिंदगी में. If you are constantly told, even when you are not told that by someone in your family, the words will keep ringing in your ear. उससे दो चीजें हो सकती हैं. एक तो it will motivate you कि I will prove my father wrong, or it can completely depress you, right? So it can have both. But the common thing is that in both ways, it will take an emotional toll on your mental health. And when he could play no more and his fingers cramped up like gnarled roots of tree trunks, it was not good enough. So Beethoven is trying to better his performance, play differently, but the reaction of his father is the same harsh one. Cramped one. Okay. Cramped up means muscle cramps. It is referring to muscle cramps. Okay. Because of so much of playing on the piano, so much of effort. Gnarled means twisted and rough, like the twisted roots of tree trunks. Kabhi kabhi aapne dekha hoga na, tree trunks hote hain. There are a lot of this kind of very, especially in those kind of banyan people trees, there are those gnarled roots. Okay. So this line is a very powerful line. Ye jo line jisko maine mark kiya hai, it's a very powerful line. When he could play no more refers to Beethoven's progressive deafness. You know, he's losing his sense of hearing slowly and slowly. Initially, obviously, he could hear, it was not good enough. But gradually, he could not hear his father also. And therefore, he's seeing some kind of a physical decline in his sense of hearing. That made playing the piano impossible, because while he's playing, he can no longer hear the piano. And that is like a barrier, a physical barrier to his passion. His fingers cramped up like, wherever you see the word like or as, that means a simile ka istemal kiya gaya hai. Okay. It is creating an imagery of a twisted and deformed state of his hands. कि उसकी उंगलियां इस तरह से हो गई हैं because he's constantly practicing despite all the criticism that is being thrown at him, and it is highlighting the उससे उसकी उंगलियों पर किस तरह का असर हो रहा है. Okay, despite that he's relentlessly pursuing his music, and it was not good enough is a constant, as I said, it's a constant expression of disapproval by his father. It echoes throughout the poem. इसके बाद भी आएगा that he's not good enough. It is the internalized criticism of his father. Okay. It also portrays, I would say, in some ways, and this is a thought that I had, is almost like a tragic hero. Beethoven is almost like a tragic hero, that he wants to create perfect music, but it is not good enough. It becomes a symbol of the struggle that he is against, the internal battle that he is fighting. And this line is like a turning point, because he can no longer physically play the music, but he's still wanting to be perfect. Beethoven, a musician without his most precious tool, his eardrums could no longer pound out rhythms for the symphonies playing in his mind. He couldn't hear the audience clapping, couldn't hear the people loving him. These are beautiful lines. So what he's saying is that he's described as a musician without his most precious tool, which is his eardrums. Uske kaan ke parde he does not have. That is the most precious tool for any musician, but he does not have that. And this use of the metaphor, you know, this is a use of a metaphor. Okay. It emphasizes the centrality of hearing music. Uska apna sangeet to sunna chahiye na. Without his eardrums, Beethoven loses the most, you know, it's the most normal, most natural way of experiencing or creating music. So the symphony is playing in his mind. The symphony is playing in his mind. The music is playing in his mind. It kind of, you know, tells you about his creative genius, that despite his deafness, his mind is filled with rich melodies. They're all in his mind. The music is playing in his mind, even though he cannot hear the music. So it must, you know, just imagine. That's why I said, put yourself in the shoes of Beethoven. Or if you are a public speaker, a communicator, I speak, I can feel the words in my mind. I can feel the words on my tongue. I cannot hear the words. Imagine the frustration that you would feel, right? So that's what Beethoven was going through. He couldn't hear the audience clapping, couldn't hear the people loving him. Now, how would you feel? As I said, that you can see the people clapping for you, but you cannot hear them. Imagine situation like that. That was the, ये एक अच्छा phrase मैंने सोचा यहाँ पर you should use. That was the emotional turbulence. Turbulence. इस phrase का इस्तेमाल कीजिए. Please use this phrase. That you know, he was feeling an emotional turbulence when he performed. He felt isolated. He felt disconnected, because you're seeing them clapping, but you can't hear them. Couldn't hear the women in the front row whispering Beethoven. So, he has a lot of women admirers also, but he couldn't hear their whispers, which is like a form of hero worship. Beethoven उसीलिए italics में लिखा गया है. So he could control only the creation of his music, but his deafness prevented him from fully experiencing the admiration the audience had for him. As they let the music invade their nervous system like an armada, marching through firing cannonballs, detonating every molecule in their body into explosions of heavenly sensation. So again, very powerful imagery. An armada is like a large fleet of warships. Okay. That's what it means. And therefore, it means it is a very strong, unstoppable kind of a force. What is it doing? This metaphor is the metaphor of invasion. Okay. So the music is portrayed almost like an invader. So it's suggesting that the music is taking over the senses of the listener, and the listener can't do anything except be completely mesmerized and overtaken by that music. Cannonballs, again, to convey the thing of war, they are used in naval warfare. They are like projectiles. Bahubali mein dekha hoga, cannonballs thap karke jate hain cannon se. Okay, so they are like cannonballs. You have round cannonballs. इस तरह से तोप होगा. Okay, यहाँ से fire करके it will go out like projectiles. So they hear what are they conveying? They are conveying the powerful notes of the composer. उसके जो musical notes है उसको convey करता है उसकी melodies को. Detonating every molecule in their body. Now it conveys a very complete physical reaction, that every part of the listener's body is being affected by the music which is being composed by Beethoven. Explosions of heavenly sensation. What does it mean? It describes the physical. It also describes the emotional response as a result of these explosions of music. Okay, heavenly implies that the feeling goes beyond the physical world into something which is divine, something spiritual. So that is being conveyed. So the overall effect is that the audience is completely surrendering to the power of the music composed by Beethoven. And, the music has that transformative power that is emphasized. And, it's very interesting, I thought, that on one hand, you have Beethoven's deafness. On the other hand, you have the audience's ability to connect with the music at a very deep, at a very spiritual kind of level. So, it shows, the poem is now slowly moving from the struggle of Beethoven to the kind of impact his music is having on the minds of the listeners. Each note leaving track marks over every inch of that body, making them ache for one more hit. He was an addiction. So here it says that the metaphors are being used to convey that Beethoven is completely overtaken by his passion for music. Each note leaving track marks. What does this mean? मैं एक एक करके एक एक phrase को explain करता हूँ. Each note leaving track marks. What does it mean? It means that the notes of music are not just sound. सिर्फ आवाज नहीं है. They are also physical things that leave marks on Beethoven's body. That's kind of conveys the kitna effort and kitna passion के साथ he's kind of creating that music over every inch of that body. Okay, it emphasizes the totality of Beethoven's creativity. It's not just his hands on the music, but his entire being that is created, and then making them ache for one more hit. Now the track marks become like the marks of an addict needing more, and Beethoven's body aches not from pain, but from the craving to create and express himself through music. He was an addiction. Means that this is basically to say that, it's not just something he creates, it's an all-consuming force that he craves. Now, this is there. Now, the alternate thing is that you can also argue it from the point of view of the listeners. But, since he's talking about that body, we are assuming that he's talking more about Beethoven's body. So making them ache for one more hit, it almost like it becomes like the marks of an addict. Like you have drug addicts, you need more and more. So Beethoven's body is aching not from the pain, but from the craving, कि उसके अंदर एक लालसा है that I need to create more and more music because this is the way I can express himself. He was an addiction. Beethoven's music is not just about something he creates. It's an all-consuming force that he craves for. And kings, queens, it did not matter. He would not bow down to royalty. Koi Raja ho, Rani ho, it did not matter. The man got down on his knees for no one, but amputated the legs of his piano. So he will not compromise on his artistic ability or integrity for anyone. What he did was, and this is interesting, and this is a very dramatic line, but amputated the legs of his piano so that he could feel the vibrations through the floor. So he saying, think of Beethoven's deafness. Amputated means to cut to remove by cutting. So by removing the legs of his piano, उसने अपने piano के legs को cut कर दिए ताकि he can feel the vibrations. When he plays, he feels the vibrations on the floor itself. And he feels that's one way of connecting to the music. Because जब piano ऐसा होगा और उसकी चार टांगे होंगी, then when he is playing on the side like this, he cannot feel the music because he cannot hear it. But agar ye टांगे, if he removes and puts the piano on the floor, then he can feel the vibrations. So what he will do is that he will connect with the music physically. Okay, even though he cannot hear it fully. So it shows his determination, very incredible determination कि किसी भी तरह से I will experience my own music. The man got down on his knees for music. It shows his deep devotion to music. It's almost like his form of worship. There are many people, including my favorite A.R. Rahman, who sometimes composes music sitting on the floor, especially when it is some kind of bhajan or some kind of a Sufi music. He composes because it's almost like prayer for him. Okay, so it's a form of worship for Beethoven as well, and it highlights how central music is to his life. And when the orchestra played his symphonies, it was the echoes of his father's anthem repeating itself like a broken record, The broken record, once again, it comes back. It represents the constant and the very critical voice of his abusive father. And even in the kind of compositions that he made, Beethoven hears echoes of his father's relentless demands for perfection and the constant refrain ki, ye acha nahi hai. It is not good enough. So again, they played this thing. So it again explores the impact of his father's abuse, that, he's constantly trying to do slowly, softly, strongly, but not good enough. But this time it is of the others. So they tried to mock him. Who is he talking about? So he's talking about some other musicians who are unsure about how to handle Beethoven's very intense conducting. Agar aapko music conductor ke baare mein pata ho, you can look up photographs of someone very famous like Zubin Mehta, right? So how would a music conductor do the orchestra? So they are not able to keep pace with him. They are not able to understand him. They are struggling to understand his music. So they try to make fun of it. They try to mock him. So the line suggests that Beethoven's conducting his music might have seemed a little, कि ये क्या पागल है? पागल पागल है. So the line suggests that Beethoven's conducting might have seemed a little crazy. They might not have completely understand the depth of his emotions that he was trying to convey through his music. So they tried to mock the man, make fun of his madness by mimicking the movements, because they kind of move their hands very fast, holding their bows a quarter of an inch above the strings, not making a sound. It was perfect. So what they would do is that they were imitating his conducting gestures, but they were not playing. Because they know that, isko to suna hi nahi padega, even if they don't play. So it kind of shows the tension between Beethoven's very passionate nature and the orchestra's refusal to cooperate or their struggle to understand his music. So it was perfect. You see, the deaf have an intimacy with silence. It is there in their dreams. So this is a very powerful statement about deafness and their relationship with silence. This is a very important key phrase. The deaf have an intimacy with silence. So it explains why silence is perfect for Beethoven. People who are deaf experience silence differently. Just like the blind have a relationship with darkness, with the color black, right? So, their other sensibilities become very strong. So for Beethoven also, it is not about the absence of sound, but it is a very familiar kind of a space that he knows. So, it's not something which he experience. It's not like, when you are sleeping, you don't experience anything. You don't experience any sound. When you are awake, you experience this sound. But he does not experience sound even while he's waking up, right? It is there as a constant presence. He cannot register any sound. So, if you get a question about how deafness, listen to this carefully. If you get a question about how deafness shapes Beethoven's experience of music, you need to quote these lines. You see the deaf have an intimacy with silence, that he does not just hear music, he feels it in the vibrations and creates it within the silence that he knows so well. So it can also be interpreted as a moment of triumph. Uski bhi ek jeet hai, that even though the orchestra is not playing, he can still experience the music perfectly in his own way. You understand what I'm trying to say? That whether the orchestra is playing or not, usko nahi malum hai. But the music is playing in his mind. The listeners know that the orchestra is not playing. But for Beethoven, the entire thing is playing in his mind. I'm again telling you, this poem is not easy. It's a very complicated poem. So thoda sa effort aapko bhi lagana padega. I'm trying my best to say it, repeat it, so that the ideas go into your head. Ki what is it? And later on, when we do the question and answers, it will become more clear. But you need to kind of understand the basic gist and every phrase and every word, and whatever keywords I'm highlighting, please make a note of it. What to make, and the musicians turn to one another. Okay, the next few lines, I will tell it till Beethoven tak. I will tell you the explanation. Now, these are like, the musical composition mein crescendo hota hai na, us tarah se hai. The musicians are confused by Beethoven's behavior. His intense conducting of the music, they find it crazy. Trying to calculate the distance between madness and genius. They think madness, a genius is always mad. So the metaphor highlights a musician's struggle to understand Beethoven. They're trying to understand if his behavior is a sign of brilliance. Is he so brilliant, or is he pagal? Is he completely crazy? The next line, Beethoven's musical measurements. So it kind of, musical measurements symbolize the structure and the emotion that he pours into his compositions. The measurements are like, transcending earthly limitations, reaching beyond the towers of Babylon. What are the towers of Babylon? They are the world's first skyscraper. They were the world's first skyscraper in mythological stories. And it is a symbol of human ambition. So that's what, so the music is kind of, the musical measurements that Beethoven is putting into his composition. They are going even beyond the towers of Babylon and the vastness of space. Ek minute. Turning solar systems into symbols that crash together. Okay, so what it tried to convey is that the solar systems as symbols, comets as colliding objects. So the vastness of space, all these comets, the solar systems have all become his musical instruments. So shook the constellations until the stars began to fall from the sky. So the music's intensity is almost like creating some kind of a cosmic event in the universe. It appears to had begun to cry means even the universe is reacting emotionally. Distance must be an illusion. The man must be a genius. Beethoven. So here the musicians finally reach a conclusion that कि इस तरह का music if he creates, he has to be a genius. Okay, he's not a mad person, because they realize that distance must be an illusion, because the boundaries between the human and the cosmic are blurred by the power of between the human and what is in the cosmos, what is in the universe, what is heavenly. Everything is getting blurred, because that is the nature of the brilliance of the kind of musical compositions of Beethoven. So overall, these lines use very vivid imagery, a lot of metaphors, in order to convey that his music is going beyond all kinds of human limitations. His thoughts moving at the speed of sound, transforming emotion into music. So this conveys the intensity and the speed of the creative process of Beethoven, that his ideas flow as fast as sound. And it is very ironic, I thought, that he should talk about sound, which Beethoven can't hear, the speed of sound. Okay, so it's suggesting the rapid fire of his nature of his compositions. Transforming emotion into music means that he takes his own emotions of whether it is joy, sorrow, anger, etc., and translate it into musical form. And for a moment it was like joy was a tangible thing. So it makes the joy is what it's something which you experience, which you feel from. You cannot touch joy, you can only experience joy, right? So he's making even something like joy a tangible thing, that is something which is not abstract. It's almost like you can touch joy. So as though you can go and physically touch the feeling. These lines basically highlight the artistry of Beethoven, that he does not just create music, he's transmitting emotions in such a way that they feel very real. Tangible also means something which is very real. Like for the first time, we would watch love and hate dance together in a waltz of such precision and beauty. So the closing lines of this poem bring together the emotion and understanding along with music. So it's like a metaphorical dance. Waltz is a dance form. That it's a complex interplay of emotions in Beethoven's music. Love and hate, okay, are opposite emotions, right? Pyar hai ya ghrina hai, these are opposite emotions, but they are dancing together, and that's the power of Beethoven's music. They are brought together in a very beautiful, in a very harmonious kind of manner, and it again reflects the beauty of Beethoven's caliber of music. So that we finally understood that history was not important to know the man. All we ever had to do was listen. So the poem starts with the word listen, ends with the word listen. So that's a core message of the music poem. This is the core message, that we don't need biographies. We don't need, biographies or historical accounts to understand Beethoven. By listening to his music, listening being the key word, we can connect to the essence of the man and the kind of emotions that he poured into his composition. So basically it's saying that power of music is beyond language, beyond history. So we don't need historical accounts to understand all that. So with this, we come to the explanation of the end of the explanation of this poem. I hope आपको समझ में आ गया है, नोट्स लिख लिए हैं, इसको रिवाइज करने की जरूरत पड़ेगी. Tithonus, small towns and rivers, and Beethoven are complicated, very complex poems. So please pay attention. इसको 3-4 बार रिवाइज करने की जरूरत पड़ेगी, तभी आप इसको पूरी तरह से समझ पाएंगे. Okay, now let's look at the poetic devices. The first one, of course, is metaphor, जिसके बारे में I kept referring to imagery and metaphor in this particular poem, Beethoven. Metaphor. The notes as track marks, जिसको कि आप poem में keep marking this. This metaphor portrays the intense and all-consuming nature. Beethoven as an addiction, जो कहा गया है, it reinforces the idea that music is a driving force. Broken record, very important key phrase. It kind of captures the constant critical voice of Beethoven's father. इसके बारे में क्वेश्चंस आने के चांसेस बहुत ज्यादा हैं. Please pay attention. Prepare an answer on his relationship with his father. what kind of impact it had on him. Then solar systems as symbols and comets as colliding this thing. This is both a metaphor, it's also a hyperbole. Joy as a tangible thing that, it kind of emphasizes how Beethoven's music make emotions feel very real, very concrete. Love and hate as inner walls and the concluding lines. This is another one of interplay of emotions. Then simile जो मैंने कहा था जहां पर भी like या as का इस्तेमाल हो, that is a simile. So that has been used calculating the distance between madness and genius. The use of imagery काफी जगह पे हुआ है. The whole orchestra, music वगैरह, everything is like use of visual imagery. Repetition, the use of the word Beethoven, listen, not good enough. This is repeated many times to have an impact. और जहां पर भी capital letters में लिखा गया है, again it is to have an impact. Personification, silence is described as having an intimacy. That's a very powerful personification, which suggests some kind of a personal connection. So with this, we come to the end. I hope you have understood this entire poem. Later on, we will be doing the SWS success test papers, in which we will do the question and answers chapter wise. Also, the notes will be there in a few days on both Instagram and WhatsApp channels of Study with Sudhir. You can follow them to access those short notes. Okay, tata, bye bye. Thank you very much.